In this episode, we are talking to Bill Schmarzo, who agreed to be on this podcast, luckily. And I'm sure everyone watching this already know who you are because you're quite well known in the big data spectrum and everywhere. But still, for the benefit of someone doesn't know you, can you just tell everyone who you are?
Sure, thanks, Nathan. So I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Hitachi Vantara. So I run the data science team within Vantara. I also, though probably equally interesting, is I teach. I teach at the University of San Francisco, and I also teach at the National University of Ireland in Galway. And the combination of the work I do at Hitachi Vantara, which is very customer-centric, spend a lot of time on the road. Not recently, mind you, but I'll be one of the first people back on airplanes when I get a chance, because I love working with customers and I love working with students, because I find when I do that, I'm always learning more from them sometimes than what I teach them. So that's kind of my background.
Oh, that's great. So whenever I do a search online or anywhere, like put your name, always this term comes up, Dean of Big Data comes up. Can you just let everyone know how that name come to you?
Yeah, so it's funny. So at the very first Strata conference they had in Santa Clara, they asked me to come and do a session that was more business centric. They had the early Strata conferences were a blast, lots of data scientists, and we were just trying to crack the big data stuff, and AI was still kind of a bit on the horizon, and we were just, it was a fun time, but the conference was very nerdy, it was very technical. So the two organizers that I had met in a previous conference said, hey Schmarz, do you mind coming and doing a session about why is this important to the business? Why is big data important to the business? And so I ran a session, I called the Big Data MBA, and I sort of wanted to help the engineers understand how what they were doing was so important to the organization. So did my presentation, and it came off very well. In fact, came off so well I wrote a book that sort of helped drive off that. But afterwards, I went and was interviewed on theCUBE, the Silicon Valley folks, the CUBE folks interviewed me, and they said, well, what did you present about? And I presented about, how these techniques and these Michael Porter techniques and economic concepts and all this sort of stuff. And one of the guys said, well, you're like the Dean of Big Data. And it stuck. So I became the Dean of Big Data because I was teaching about the business aspects of big data. I like that nickname.
That's great. So I always wondered that one day I would ask you this question, how we brand it. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Coming to the big data, then I was watching one of the videos on the that you made on that showed you on the Hitachi Vantara YouTube, where you said organizations doesn't need a big data strategy, but they need a business strategy to incorporate big data. So someone who is beginning to get into data science would like to know what does that mean?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a really important point. In fact, I'm working on a blog right now I'm bringing that back up again. The world of data science is full of opportunities, and you don't need just to be a data scientist to participate. Now, the data scientists, they're the ones who are mastering all these new technologies, neural networks and reinforcement learning and machine learning. They're mastering all the technologies, and they play a very important role in the process. But you also need to have business analysts, people who can understand and translate where and how data and analytics can drive value for the organization. So one of the things that I see organizations get hung up on is they say, well, we got to have a big data strategy. We got to have an AI strategy. We got to have a machine learning. Like, no. You're by putting them into separate categories, you actually are offending the people in that category, right? I know you don't mean to do that, but you don't categorize that. They are disciplines, but the real value of those disciplines of data science and data engineering and the business analyst comes when you're actually driving the business. And so instead of, you don't need a big data strategy, you don't need an AI strategy. What you need is a business strategy that incorporates big data and AI. And what happens here is when you flip that little that pixel there, when you change that perspective, all of a sudden everybody in the organization goes, oh, I get that, right? My business strategy is maybe I'm trying, because of COVID-19, I'm trying to figure out how do I drive online sales? How do I do better at interfacing with the delivery services if I'm a restaurant, right? Well, if that's your business initiative, then you can go through a process saying, well, what data might I need in order to help drive that? And what analytics would be best in order to drive that? And by having that frame of the business value, it makes the data science, it makes the data engineering, it makes the big data conversations, the AI conversations much more relevant and less esoteric. And we don't seem like we're bizarre people sitting in, behind closed doors. We're actually front and center with the business, trying to make sure we drive value.
Oh, that's really great. Like to think in a different perspective. Like when even I am culprit of that as well. Like when I think about like organization, they'll be like, what big data can do for the organization, and you think like big data in the center, and everything else in the organization you need to change according to the big data strategy. But what you're saying is like really the opposite. Like the organization doesn't need to change. The big data strategy you just incorporate in your organization. So. And then you talked about like economics as well in that video that I really like. So that's really a great perspective. Thank you for sharing that. You recently wrote a book called The Art of Thinking Like a Data Scientist. I've read some pages on it on Amazon. I plan to like buy it as well. Audience will be intrigued to know, like, can you tell a bit about that?
Yeah, no, so the book is really in response to a lot of workshops I run, where both with students and executives. By the way, it's very interesting, almost gratifying to see that senior executives are wrestling with the same issues that students are wrestling with. Kind of highlights the importance of continuous learning. But so I run a lot of these classes, these envisioning extra workshops with customers and students. And a lot of these workshops are founded on this idea of how do I get business executives to think like a data scientist? How do I get them to understand enough about data and analytics to figure out where and how I apply it to the business? How do I create a common language between the business stakeholders and data science team around how we're driving value? So the book is really a workbook. It's about as boring as you can find in a book, but it's got a lot of templates and guidelines and sort of walks you through this process. And what I'm learning too is that once I've released the book, I learn new things when we do these things. So I just had to publish an addendum to the book that talks more about, in this section is you're best off to do this. And so I'm finding that I'm continuously testing and learning myself about the process. And as I work with both executives and students, you pick up ideas about how to do things better. And I've always seen my job as really, 2 ears, 1 mouth, listen to the people I work with, understand what they're trying to do, and then try to translate that into something that's very, very actionable. And if I can't deliver it, I would never write about it. Because I feel like I'm always writing about things I know from personal experience works.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. Like, you always, when you think about like a data science team, you always think like, okay, they are the ones, they keep that knowledge, only they need to think about like a data scientist. But what you're saying is like everyone else, like the sales representative, the CEO, the CTO, everyone need to think like a data scientist for the organizations to perform better. And then I really like what you wrote. I read the first couple of pages about you hire data scientists and then you wait for the magic, nothing happens. So and I like what you said about like data science is a team sport, you said.
Yes.
So people coming to this field would really like to know, like sometimes people really only concentrate on the technology bit, like okay, I need to learn these bits and then I'll be fine in the organization. So what is your advice to people that focus only on technology?
Great question, because what I have found is that most data science projects don't fail because of technology. They fail because you don't get the buy-in of all the key stakeholders. And so having strong communication skills, ability to ask thoughtful questions, listen, process, and then ask again becomes really critical. If you can't get the business stakeholders to buy into what you're doing, then what you're doing, if they don't use what you're doing, then why even bother? So good data scientists, even if they're even really super knowledgeable on the latest in neural network capabilities, should continuously work on their ability to communicate. If you really want to future-proof yourself from technology evolution, then the ability to speak the language of your customers becomes critical. And I'm a big believer in the concept of this thing called design thinking, because I think design thinking forces you to think about your customers, to understand what their win conditions are, what they're trying to accomplish, literally to walk along with them on their journey. And once you understand your customers, now you're in a better position to say, okay, here's how I can help. And so my advice to anybody who's really looking to get into data science, if you learn how to use TensorFlow, you're going to be in trouble. Right? If you learn TensorFlow, you're going to be in trouble. But if you learn how to learn TensorFlow, then you position yourself for growth. And this ability, because the technologies are going to change. The underlying technologies for reinforcement learning and things we haven't even thought about yet that quantum computing is going to unleash on us. If you don't have that customer dialogue, the ability to be able to understand what customers are trying to accomplish, and then translate what they've said from what you know on the data science side, you risk your career. But the best way to future-proof yourself is to always think about the customer first and foremost, and then let the technology come along that helps best to address what the customer is trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that's a great advice. Like in many times we concentrate on the technology so much. Like, oh, I need to learn R, I need to learn Python, I need to learn this algorithm, that algorithm, and then end of the day, if you're delivering value to the customers and you go and tell them like, oh look, I use this cool model to produce this, they don't really care, because what they want is what value from what you can deliver to them. So it's really important that you need to think in terms of the customers. So that's really great point there.
And all of everybody on my data science team has been taught design thinking techniques. In fact, every one of our projects we do has a design thinker on them, because we need to have somebody who can help to bridge that gap between the business stakeholders and the data science team. And so every one of my data scientists knows design thinking techniques. They know how to interact in front of a customer. Now there's data scientists, really good ones, who don't need to talk to customers. They sit back and, back in headquarters or the Puzzle Palace, and they do great stuff. But all of our data scientists, we teach how to talk to customers. Because the one thing we have learned is the customers have the best ideas of what data sources they think might be the best ones to try. Especially when you get down to the frontline employees, the nurses, the technicians, the doctors, when you start talking to those people, they're chock full of really valuable knowledge. They've been making decisions how to reduce unplanned operational downtime for years, decades, right? And they've developed a series of heuristics that they use to help make decisions. Oh, when this light blinks 3 times red and I hear this rumble sound, I know the clutch is going to go out. Really? All right. Well, as a data scientist, I want to actually try to prove that. Because if I can prove that, I can operationalize it. And if I can operationalize it, then I can scale it. And all of a sudden I can take and make everybody my best technician. I can make everybody my best nurse, my best doctor, my best teacher. So the ability to be able to talk to and integrate and listen to customers and using these design techniques to really walk in their shoes makes our data science team so much more effective.
That's really great. Like I haven't even thought about data scientists upskilling your data scientists to speak to customers and then getting their inputs. So that's a really great idea.
It's hard. I know there are a lot of people who come from a technology background. They're almost scared to talk to a customer, and part of that becomes because they know so much about their domain space. They feel very comfortable in their space.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be pushed out of their comfort zone. If you don't get pushed out of your comfort zone, you're never going to learn. And so we throw people into the fight, right? You're going to go talk to this customer, you're going to interview them, and it's hard. But what you learn really quickly is the customer is equally scared of you. right? You're scared of the customer because the customer knows the business but doesn't respect maybe what you do. And the customer is like, well, you know all this technology stuff and I'm an idiot. So what you realize that everybody's kind of in the same boat. You're kind of both scared of each other. When you start talking, you have this synergy thing that really takes off. And it's really the 1 + 1 = 7 kind of phenomenon when you bring, a data scientist who can talk to the business, and then business users who know how to think like a data scientist. We have incredible results in our data science, not because our data scientists use better tools or techniques, but because our data science knows how to work with business stakeholders who know how to think like a data scientist.
Yeah, that's really, really, really great advice and tips to the new starters, where don't focus just on the technology, think about what the customer wants and improve upon that communication skill. Just have a look on like improving your communication and other skills as well, which comes down to like, I've read another blog of you, which you said, where you said like an organization doesn't need to be data driven; they need to be value driven. So that is something that intrigued me as well. Like, yeah, that's interesting perspective from you.
Yeah, and it does get down to we mentioned earlier about this concept of economics, right? Well, what is economics? Economics is the science of how to create wealth or value, and we want to be not just data driven, because data is a latent asset, right? In of itself, it has very little value. But when we catalyze that data through analytics and such, that's when it delivers these economic value, more insights about your customers, your products, your operations, your services. That's where it comes into play. So it always frustrates me when I hear somebody says, well, we got to become data driven. No, not really. You need to become value driven. How are you delivering value to your constituents and to your customers?
Yeah, I mean, it's really like they've used that term so much. When even when someone else says like, no, you have to be value driven, you'll be like, no, not really. I've been listening to this term for like the past 10 years, but it's really interesting and good perspective. Like,
Ethan, you raise a really good point. The difference between when I work with students and I work with executives is when I work with students, they don't have to unlearn things. Many of them, they're learning for the very first time. What they're going to find as they progress in life and they get older, that you learn things that at some point in time becomes not relevant anymore. And you have to be able to unlearn. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge that students are going to face as they go along. And I see this with executives all the time, is this inability to unlearn things. This is the way things work, right? And I like to use the example of, rule of thumb with a car is that you replace the oil, change the oil every 3,000 miles, right? Well, that's not true anymore, right? I drive a hybrid, right? Somebody drives an electric car, they're not changing the oil at all in that car, right? So, or very seldom. So it's very different as people progress through their careers. They have to be willing to challenge what they know, to take these statements of gospel that they've always believed in and be willing to challenge and say, is that true anymore? And if you can do that throughout your career, I think you're going to find you're going to prosper. But it's hard. There's been several pivot points in my life where something I thought was the absolute way you did things, and I realized I was wrong. That's a hard process to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I can really relate to that as well. Like some points when you're so much like set in your ways at on certain things, and then when you have to change it all of a sudden a 360 degree, and then you're always like, not really. But
yeah,
if you don't adapt, then that's where you stop learning, and that's where you will stop growing, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great. So, and I know you are in a very senior position, and then you don't have to like hire any data scientist or interview a data scientist personally. But
oh, you're wrong. Oh, you're wrong. I interview all of our data scientists. We have built, I think, a very special team here, and culture is everything. And I do get personally involved in everybody we hire on board.
Yeah.
It's not a giant team, but I really, I know I'm not going to grill somebody on, well, here's a problem, here's a data set, how are you going to attack it? I want to know, what happens when they get into a situation they're comfortable with. How well do they collaborate with others? Can they admit when they're wrong? That's a really interesting, right? So, one of the key questions is, tell me when something you thought was the way to do things and you were wrong. What did you learn from that? And really drill into that, because culture is everything. And I'm very, very fortunate here at Hitachi Vantara. A lot of people on my team are people I've worked with in the past. So I took this job, I immediately went out, I knew who I wanted to bring on board because I knew they were smart, they were collaborative, and they were fun to be with. And I want to find people like that. We have fun at our company, right? We have fun. We work really hard, but there's times when you have fun. We laugh at each other. We laugh at ourselves. We don't take ourselves too seriously. So yes, I do interview all of our data scientists.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that they're going to fit into the culture here, because I don't want somebody who's not a match, because it'll be equally painful for them if their style of work doesn't match ours. So it isn't just greedy on my side. It's also respectful on their side to make sure, here's how we operate. You're going to be talking to customers. You're going to be flying to customer sites. You might be down there for a week or two working with them, and you're going to have to learn how to communicate with them. Are you okay with that? Do you feel comfortable you could do that? Are you up for the challenge? And then you get a chance to learn about people.
That's great. A lot of times, why I said is because a lot of times, like when you're in senior management, you just sometimes just tell your immediate manager to do the recruitment. But it's great that you get involved in meeting data scientists and finding out if they're cultural fit. That's the main thing. So that was my question to you as well.
Yeah.
If someone just fresh out of university, or someone who wants to start their journey, they studied all the foundations, they got the technical skills and everything, and they they applied for the position. What would you look for in such a person?
Well, so again, it's a team interview, but what I look for is their nature. Do they smile? Can they have fun? Have they had situations where they've been thrown into a no-win situation? What do? We all get thrown into no-win situations. We all get thrown in over our head. How do you do? How do you handle failure? Right? Is that a learning opportunity, or is that decimate you? So yeah, I look for people like that, and then the rest of the team is looking for other skill sets. We all kind of divide and conquer, and everybody in the team has a right to veto somebody. If they don't think somebody's the right person for whatever reason, we respect that. I respect my team enough to know that if they think that person is not a good match, I'll go for it. If I'm soft on somebody and somebody says, no, I really think that's a good match for the following reasons, I'll defer to them. One of the things understand, I'm a terrible manager. I'm probably, if they have in the dictionary a picture of good managers and a picture of a bad manager, my picture would be right there. Because I really believe that, I believe that what I tell my team is, if you're going to come to me to make a decision that you already know what the decision is, then make it. Right? If there may be a situation you want to bounce it off me, but I want my team to be empowered to make decisions. And if you're coming to me because you don't know the answer and you want to brainstorm, that's great. But if you're coming to me and here's the answer, then why come to me? Just do it. Now, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make a bad decision. That's okay. Just don't make the same bad decision twice. Right? What did you learn from that decision? What are making innocent bad decisions is okay, right? But it isn't good if you can't learn from those. So if I don't give my team the power to make decisions, how are they ever going to grow? Exactly. And let's be really honest. The better my team is, the better I look, right? They make me look like geniuses, right? I can go and do I love to go on the road and talk to customers. They don't need me to do this. They don't need me to do that. So, if you build yourself a really strong team, they will make you look really smart.
That's some really, really great points. The important thing is as much as they know that you interview the technical skills, it's really important that to find out that are they a good fit in your team, and then are they going to thrive in your team, or are they going to be? And then it's really great to know you trust your team really well, because if they say this person's I'm not sure about this person, or this person's really great, and if you have the opposite if they felt the opposite, you'll still accept their viewpoint, and it's really great to know that as well. Like that leads on to my next question. Like there's a lot of people that starting on this journey. What is your advice to them? What would be your advice to them?
Take a job. Here's what I mean by this. Don't look for the perfect job. Just start getting experience. Everybody wants to go work for Google or Apple, right? They're great places to work. They treat their employees really well, tremendous benefits. You may not start at Google. You may not. You might start at someplace else. Don't worry about where you start. Worry about where you end up. And one of the things I'm seeing opportunities for right now for a lot of college graduates, this is going to be a really hard market to get jobs in, but not necessarily so. There's a lot of nonprofits out there who are dying for some strong college graduates who have strong leadership skills. They're dying for it. And so maybe you don't go work for Google. Maybe you go work for the Red Cross or Salvation Army or some other area. Your most important thing to focus in on is what is your job doing to build your brand, and how are you building your skill sets out? And there's many times your best job might be at a smaller organization where you got to do a lot more diverse things than to jump right away to a big organization like Google or Facebook or something where it's great, but you're going to be compartmentalized among thousands of other people. So my advice is we all have aspirations where we want to go, and those aspirations change. That's okay. But don't be afraid to start small and start working there. And I think again, within small organizations, and nonprofits don't get enough respect here, you can go to a nonprofit and have a huge impact and have huge responsibility and really have a chance to stretch your wings out and really grow. So do something. And again, don't worry about where you start, as long as what you're doing each step of the way is building out your brand and what you want to stand for.
Yeah, that's really, really great advice. Like a lot of people, like when they start out, they like you said, they just want their perfect job or their dream job as their first job, which won't be always the case. So sometimes you'll start with a job which you probably won't be doing the thing that you imagined you will be doing when you were doing the dream job. But you start small, then build up, and then reach that goal, like that complete that journey. That's really important. Like don't get disheartened if you don't get your dream job on your first go.
Yeah, what I told my kids, I said, until you're 30 years old, don't really worry about what you do. Chase your dreams, chase your passion, find things that you like to do. What you don't want to do, though, is get into debt. Don't buy a house. If you get married, don't have kids right away. When you're young, you want to be flexible. So you can try, I'm going to go work for here. And you don't want to have to work for money. If money becomes what you work for, then your life is going to be more challenging. I think you work for opportunity to learn. I think you work for the opportunity to give back and to collaborate and be a part of society. I think if you can do that along the path, you will find what your passion is. And when you find your passion, then you don't have a job. You just you have aspirations. I'm very, very fortunate that I've always been a data and analytics guy. And for the first 10 years of my life, no one gave a hoot about data and analytics. Right? The low man on the totem pole, the guy cleaning out the sewers and such. But all of a sudden, I just stayed with it. And I really felt strongly passionate about what you could do with data and analytics. And then the book Moneyball came out, and people are like, oh, wow, you can do some things. And then I think it was Davenport wrote the Competing with Analytics. And then all of a sudden, this analytics thing became a bigger and bigger thing. And so find something you love to do, and then everything else will take care of itself.
Exactly. And it's all about that passion, isn't it? Like, different people will say different things, but you just need to be true to yourself and then do what you love.
Amen.
Yeah. We're almost at the end of our interview. I just got one last question for you. It's
Sure.
related to data science. It's like you are you hold a responsible senior position in an organization, and then but at the same time, you're very accessible. I just send you a message in LinkedIn, straight away you go back to me, then ask me to email you, then I emailed you, then you schedule a meeting straight away, which is I thought that's really, really great, which doesn't happen often with especially when we're talking about senior management. What is your take on that?
That's a really good point. So I don't respond to many requests, to be honest with you. And to be honest with you, I can't tell you why I responded to yours. I mean, well, you sounded very sincere. I like what you're doing. There was a strong sense of giving back. Let me tell a little story. I got a similar request from a fellow named Dennis Dennehy. Came through LinkedIn, and he wanted me to come over to Ireland, to Galway, and to teach and work with local organizations. And he read all my material. He was really a big fan. And we never talked on the phone. We'd never met in person. And I agreed to come over. I don't know exactly why.
Wow.
Something about him was very sincere, and he really wanted to give back. And of course, I checked out to make sure he wasn't some huckster or something. He was actually associated with the university. And the first time I met him was the time I walked off the plane in Dublin, and we shook hands. And now we have a very, very strong relationship. And so I guess sometimes you can't be afraid to try something different. You can't be afraid, somebody will reach out to you, and people reach out to me, and there might be a connection there. There might not be, but if you don't try, you never know. So I love it. I have a friend of mine, one of my best mentors, Kate Mitchell, and what she always tells me is, be fearless. I think that is the great advice. Be fearless. Do things. I'm not afraid to fail. I failed a lot in my life, and people probably don't know, but I've been fired 3 times in my life. I've been fired 3 times because I was fired because of what I believed in. And I come to work every day willing to be fired, to be fearless, to try to pursue my passions and do what I think is the right thing to do. And I think if you do that, yeah, you're going to run into a situation where you're going to get fired, but that's God's way of saying, I'm saving you, move on.
Yeah, that's really, really great advice as well. Like thank you for responding to me. That's really nice talking to you. But that is a small lesson to people messaging on LinkedIn as well, isn't it? Like if something's genuine, and then people will reach out to you. But if you keep something like sort of like messaging after messaging without no substance, then people probably won't. So
Yeah.
One of the rules of networking, I think, isn't it, that people should start learning as well.
You're a great example of how to use social media for good, and I appreciate what you're doing. I want to support what you're doing. I think it's great. I think you're a living example of what the next generation is going to bring. And to be honest with you, why I'm very hopeful. Can you guys quickly take power? You got to get all the old white guys out of power here.
Thank you very much, Bill. I really, really enjoyed. I learned a lot from you, and then I'm sure when this podcast starts, people will really appreciate what you said. And then that's a lot of knowledge that you shared. That a lot of people are confused, like where to start, how to start, what are the skills they need apart from the technology bit. What does a data science team look like? What are things like that? So it was really, really informative what you shared, and then holding such a senior position, and you answered these questions for the aspiring data scientists. So thank you very much.
Nathan, thank you very much for reaching out to me, and I'm sure I'll be seeing more of you.
Thank you very much.
All right, cheers.